I ordered breakfast the other day, and all I heard was fritter, and up until then, I'd had chicken fritters. So I thought this, yeah, and I ended up with a quarter of a fried guinea pig, and I was like, yeah,
Right, but they eat a lot of
they
guinea pig
love
down
guinea
there. Yeah,
pig.
they love it. Did you try
Love
it?
it. Well, I had to. It was basically what I ordered that breakfast. Yeah, there's not a lot of meat on it,
Right,
surprisingly.
right. Was it good?
No, so yeah, most of it ended up on the side dish.
This is episode 23 of 1F Jeff.
The number 23 has an uncanny way of showing up in science, nature, and mystery. Humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes in their DNA, and the Earth is tilted at about 23 degrees on its axis, giving us seasons. It's said that blood takes roughly 23 seconds to circulate through the body, and the 23rd hour, 11 p.m., marks the final hour before a new day begins. These patterns help give rise to the 23 enigma, the belief that this number appears suspiciously often and carries hidden meaning.
Hello, my friends. How are you? Good? I hope that's a yes. If not, keep listening. This podcast is about to make you feel better. Why, you ask? Because today's guest is Gary Clark.
Gary Clark is a British long-distance cyclist currently attempting to ride around the world. Right now, he's pedaling from Alaska all the way to the southern tip of Chile, continuing a journey that's already taken him across Australia, through Southeast Asia, India, Japan, and into the mountains of Nepal. Before turning to life on the road, Clark worked on offshore oil rigs and platforms, a career he left behind to pursue a slower, more deliberate way of seeing the world from the saddle of a bicycle.
Sometimes you meet a person and you just feel like you'll know them forever. And that was how I felt after I met Gary in Mexico City earlier this year. We were in a Spanish class together, which was incidentally the same class where I met the couple who I had dinner with in St. Louis on my road trip, episode 9, if you're curious. I didn't learn much in that class. I don't think Gary did either. But I met some great people, and I'll take great people over knowledge any day of the week. We had a fairly immediate connection, Gary and I. We share a similar sense of humor and perspective on life and the way the world works. And he's just a really likable guy. We did a bunch of sightseeing together, ate some amazing food together, and I actually ended up letting him crash for a couple nights in the extra bedroom in my Airbnb, so we could go on this amazing hot air balloon ride over the Teotihuacan pyramids. The interesting thing about Gary is that he barely talked about his bike trip. Most of the people in the Spanish class we were in didn't even know that he was doing this until I mentioned it, and then they were like, whoa, really? And I think it's because Gary doesn't really think what he's doing is all that remarkable. It's just something he likes to do, so he's doing it. But it is remarkable, as I'm sure most of you would agree. So I'm grateful that he was willing to take some time out from this epic trip of his to talk to me from the guest house he was staying at in Huaraz, Peru. And just FYI, due to Peruvian internet issues, we had to have this conversation over WhatsApp. So the sound quality isn't perfect, but you'll get over it. You probably won't even notice it. Or maybe you wouldn't have noticed it had I not said anything. And now that I have said something, you'll be listening for it. So maybe just disregard. Thank you, as always and forever, to my new Patreon subscribers. Actually, there's just one since the last episode, but everything helps. So thank you to my new and continuing Patreon subscribers for your support of the podcast. I'll be putting some photos of Gary and I in Mexico City in the Patreon feed for your enjoyment. And there's another bonus episode for you on the way. If you yourself would like some visual aids to enhance your experience of this podcast, or if you'd just like to help support the show, please do go to patreon.com/1FJeff and sign up for as little as $5 a month. And you too will get access to all the amazing bonus content I've put out there. And you'll get street cred. Patreon.com/1FJeff. And whether you're a Patreon subscriber or not, I appreciate you and your magical ears, which you are using right now to hear my voice. I don't know much about how ears work, but the little I do know leads me to believe that it's kind of miraculous, this ability to hear, and I'm glad you're using this miracle to listen to 1F Jeff. So, Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Here's Gary Clark talking to me from a guest house in Huaraz, Peru.
Yeah, I messed around on ChatGPT. I had to get something together for an insurance company, and then I managed to go out, get some camping gas and a few supplies ready for the off tomorrow.
All right. Well, I think this will actually work. It's not ideal, but Peruvian internet is not known for its high quality connections.
Absolutely, mate. We'll work around it.
Right. So, Gary Clark, it's so good to talk to you again. It's been, about 8 months or so since we met?
It has been, Jeff. Yeah. Very
Yeah.
good memories.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So, Gary and I met, I was in Mexico earlier this year, and we met in a Spanish class, actually. That wasn't a very good Spanish class, as Gary and I have joked about many, many times. I forget what the one joke was about. This is better than that thing. We just wanted to know how to order tacos. So.
Yeah.
And
we
instead,
needed phrases. And we were getting this, that, and
yeah, we were getting some more advanced things. So yeah, it wasn't the best class in terms of learning Spanish, but in terms of like making friends, it was great. And then me and Gary went on a magical air balloon ride in Mexico and by the pyramids outside of Mexico City. That was kind of an amazing day, actually, and we didn't die.
We didn't die, and it was magnificent. The views was incredible. And I was amazed how many balloons they put up in the air.
Yeah, there was one that crashed recently too, I saw.
What's that?
Yeah, I think I sent you. I thought I sent you the link, but yeah, somebody died. So at least we didn't. We didn't get on that one, so that's good.
That was good. That is always a positive when you make it back.
So where are you right now? Where do I find you right now?
I'm in Huaraz, which is the basically the climbing and hiking sort of epicenter for the high peaks around this area.
What big city is it near? Is it near anything I would know?
Well, it's close. It's inland from Lima, really. Lima being on the coast.
Right.
And then Huaraz is pretty much as soon as you see the snow-capped mountains, this is in the foothills of that.
So it's pretty.
It is stunning. Yeah, it's lovely. And there's a lot of international backpackers and people that have come probably specifically for the climbs.
Right. So tell me, I mean, I know, but like tell my listeners about what kind of trip you're on here, your biking trip here.
Yeah. Basically, COVID put a good couple of years gap in between my 5-year riding around the world. To look for a decent start to finish ride, I decided to pick the Alaska to Patagonia, Ushuaia in Argentina route, which really is an unbroken cycle ride continuous through the North and South and Central Americas up until you get to Panama and the Darien Gap, which you either boat or you, in my case, fly over.
Oh, you took a plane. I was wondering.
I did. I was the wrong time of year, Jeff. If I was a little bit sooner, the sun would have been out and it probably would be quite a pleasant ride. For my time of year, it was just going to be a choppy, rather unpleasant, I hope this ends sort of ride.
Right, vomit inducing.
Yeah, exactly.
So you started in where in Alaska did you start and when was that?
Yeah, I started up in the northernmost accessible part of Alaska, which is Dead Horse, Prudhoe Bay.
Okay.
Which is pretty much only really accessible because of the oil that is up there.
Of course.
And then you cycle down a supply line, which pretty much shadows the pipeline running from Dead Horse down to Valdez. Which is where it's shipped out all the time.
Right, the giant pipeline and all that. And when was that? When did you start?
Yeah, I started about as early as you can in the season, which was around about the 9th of June, and I was about the third person out that year.
The 9th of June of last year?
Of last year,
of
yes.
2024.
Yep.
Okay. And then you're planning to get to where by the end of the trip? Where's the final destination?
Final destination is the southern tip down by Tierra Fuego.
Yeah, Tierra del
That's
Fuego.
yeah, and Ushuaia is the name of the town. They also use it for a destination or a leaving point for the Antarctic cruises.
Right. And how far from there are you? When do you think you'll get there?
Well, I did have a quick look. I'm roughly about 7,500 kilometers,
Jesus.
which yeah, even with the Andes in between, it's going to be a good January stroke February.
Right, but it'll be summer
So-
though, so
It will. Hopefully, it starts getting warmer. The only thing is the winds, which
right.
I'm kind of hoping are in my favor going from north to south.
I mean, I dated a woman who lived in Chile for 13 years in what city was it? It was Punta Arenas, which is right down there in Patagonia. And she's triggered by the wind now because it's like a constant gale force wind down there, according to her. So, just preparing you, Gary, because it may be
Yeah.
it may be windy.
Much appreciated, Jeff.
Yeah.
No, I have ridden the reverse from Ushuaia to, funnily enough, this town, Huaraz. And then I returned and got back to Lima and then flew into New Zealand. That was the first part of my ride.
Oh, so you've already kind of done this part of the trip, but just backwards.
I have. This is roughly as far north as I got 10 years ago.
So this is part of a grander scheme of biking across the entire world.
Yeah, I was going to end in Australia because I did go through the point system to enter and emigrate to Australia. However, during the ride, I realized that it was such a fantastic lifestyle. And I got less and less interested in going back to my former job, which prior to the cycling, it was quite important to me.
Right. So when did you decide to do this incredible biking around the world to a degree?
It was a good 10 years ago. And I set off with the intention of it being a 6-month cycle ride. Basically, I'd saved South America as a big trip. So I looked at, I was working offshore at the time, and I was looking at it and I thought, well, there's no train routes. It'll all be by buses, which I didn't really fancy. And then I thought about a motorbike, but I've got no real history of riding a motorbike or maintaining one. And I thought that sounds like a disaster waiting to happen.
Right.
So I basically trialed a fold-up bike in Burma for 3 weeks, having flown into Bangkok and bought one. Yeah, I was like, this is doable. So then it was just going to be a 6-month cycle trip back to Australia. But by the time I got there, I thought I'd just as well cycle round Australia whilst I've got the visa.
Right.
And then during those 2 years, I was like, yeah, Japan might be nice. And then Southeast Asia, Northern India, Kazakhstan.
You've done
the
all
rest
these.
of
You've
the
biked across all these countries, all these places.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Did you train before you started this whole adventure, or did you just start doing it?
Yeah. I wasn't much of a cyclist. And probably even when I'm not cycling around the world, cycling's not something I think, oh, I'll get on the bike.
Huh.
So I just find it the best way to travel. The right pace, you see things, you interact with people. You're not trying to just get from A to B and then do stuff when you get to B. Your
Right.
journey starts when you set off in the morning. You get some wonderful camping spots. Yeah, there's a lot of positives. It does keep you fit. Obviously, it's good for your mental and physical health.
Sure.
So yeah, I hadn't done a great deal, but I was trying to keep myself a little bit active on the treadmill and a few things whilst working offshore. Otherwise, you can get a bit drawn into 16, 17-hour days.
Yeah.
And a lot of that can be in and around the computer.
Sure. Yeah.
So
Tell me about it. Um,
yeah.
so you just have been biking, and then wherever you feel like kind of stopping, if you're like in the middle of nowhere, you just pitch a tent and set up and sleep there, wherever it is.
Well, some countries favor or lean to it a little bit better than others. The Colombia and Ecuador, for example, a lot of it was fenced in.
Right.
So if you get to that sort of north, the North Island in New Zealand was the same. I don't want to jump over a fence to put a tent up. So you
Right. Right.
try
Right.
to get, you try to get to either a designated camp spot or you look for accommodation, which was affordable, obviously, for Ecuador and Colombia.
Right. Right. I mean, it's a very inexpensive way to travel, I'd imagine.
You're not paying for any of the buses,
Yeah.
trains, or whichever else.
Right.
There's no
Right.
fuel involved. You eat cheaper probably than you would even if you were backpacking.
For sure.
So
For sure.
the costs are definitely kept down.
I mean, are you tired?
uh, Funnily enough, for the first time in the years that I've been riding, my legs played up when I got to the south of Colombia, and that was that was a good eye opener. Made me focus on how much I was doing per day.
Right.
The hills are no joke. Obviously, when you're a little bit younger, you don't have to worry about these things. But
Sure. Sure.
nutrition, fluids. So, yeah, I've
How old are you now, Gary?
55 now.
Unbelievable. Is this the longest trip you've done?
The previous one started off that it was going to be 6 months and ended up 5 years. So,
Oh, right. But that was with some breaks. You were not biking the entire time.
absolutely
Right.
no. In fairness, you've got to pace it. Otherwise, you do mentally find yourself a little bit under it. It's you've got to get the balance. Otherwise, it can become a bit of a
Like a
bit of a
slog.
task.
Right. Like a
Yeah,
slog.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. You stopped in Mexico City for 2 or 3 weeks or something, didn't you? I mean, you were there for a
yeah.
while. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. The other one with that, Jeff, is basically once I got out of North America, I felt as if I was trying to chase the seasons. I couldn't start in Alaska
Right.
too soon. I had to get over Colorado before it started to snow,
Yeah.
and then basically by the time I got to the Baja, I knew I could slow down in Central America
Right.
to try to time it to get to Patagonia in their summertime.
Yeah. And how many miles do you think that'll be this whole trip? Do you have any
Yeah.
idea? Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really plan much, Jeff. Really, I just I quite like the spontaneity of turning up to places that you don't have a clue about.
Sure.
I have a little bit of an idea of the route. You generally know roughly where you're heading, but that can change, within a couple of days. So yeah, I'm basically gearing up now for a route that's called the Peruvian. I think they call it Great Divide.
Uh-huh.
Which is something that some intrepid people beforehand, in fact, they were called Pikes on Bikes. It's now been designated by bikepacking.com, and it's one of their main South American routes.
Oh,
So
well, that's good. At least
it,
it'll be made for bikes. I think that's probably. I would get sketched out because I don't like sharing the road with cars. It freaks me out. I feel like I'm gonna get hit by a car.
that can happen, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah. You do hear of cyclists out and about that unfortunately do get hit. And unfortunately, motorists don't consider that you've been riding for 7 or 8 hours that day and your legs ain't very good.
Right.
Um,
Right.
They presume you're just riding around a corner.
Right. And what kind of what are you taking with you? What do you have on your bike?
Yeah, one of the first things when you first set off is you generally overpack. You take a lot of nice to haves, there were extra couple of tops and a few other things. So once you've been out a while, you streamline that down because as soon as you hit the hills, every
Right.
little t-shirt you
Right.
can fill. I carry, and again, you sort of do your homework to select decent quality stuff that packs down small volume and is light. So yeah, camping gear, sleeping stuff, cooking stuff, warm gear, warm clothes, wet clothes. Well, sorry, wet weather clothes, and obviously something for maintenance on the bike.
Sure, sure. How many flats have you gotten on this trip?
I got a load. Actually, I was doing fine in North America. I had a couple of random ones
Right.
that you think, oh, that's a bit unfortunate.
Yeah.
But then when I got to the Baja, I was starting to pick up quite a few thorns. Basically, I think they're goat heads. They call them. Even Arizona, maybe.
Right.
And once it starts, it seems as if you just end up on a bad run of them. So
Uh-huh.
you're constantly taking that back wheel off. But since Mexico, and in fact, just after, I think I just had it done, Jeff, when I came around to yours before we did the balloon trip, I went tubeless. And
Oh, right.
that had been going fantastic up until, where did I get to? Somewhere in Colombia. Plenty of glass on the road. Just happened to hit, well, the tire was getting a little bit thin as well. And then it was just too big to plug. So we put a tube in it, and it was a new tire. So,
Wow.
and touch wood, been good ever since.
So have there been, like, what have been some of the highlights of this bike trip itself? Have there been anything, any like what stood out in terms of either experiences or places or whatever it is? Any takeaways?
Yeah, Alaska scenery is stunning. You get a North, what was it, British Columbia, a
Mhm.
lot of river riding. The road is alongside a river. That's always beautiful.
Right.
The ride down from North America, which is the one they race, just so varied. I don't know what I anticipated for that ride, but it just changed within the day. So, it's the sort of thing when you're riding, you're looking for. You don't want, unfortunately, like a bit of Australia, or then there's a stretch in Argentina heading south, which is the Pampas. It's just the same hour after hour, day after day. So,
Right.
if you get the variety, Baja was fantastic in Mexico. Mexico itself was a great surprise. I really didn't know what to expect there. Central America, there've been El Salvador had fantastic, friendly people. There were wonderful beaches, obviously, through there. Colombia was a treat. Ecuador, again, lovely people. Peru is just stunning. I came up through a gorge the other day.
Wow.
Hadn't expected it. I came down the gorge as the opposite side on a different river, and I thought that was absolutely amazing. And then I think the reason that it was so slow coming back up the gorge was stopping so often to take the photos.
Right. Amazing. Have there been any have people been generally nice that you've met? Has there been any animosity, or is it generally mostly like just super friendly, curious people that you've met?
I think that's one of the absolute advantages, Jeff, with the riding with a bicycle. For some reason, you're just more approachable. I think you're less of a threat or
Right.
whatever. I
Right.
don't, I don't know what it is. People are more curious. You're also in more remote places. I generally find if you're out in the countryside of pretty much any country, people are wonderful.
That makes sense.
It's the city,
Yeah.
it's the cities where people are condensed.
Mhm.
There's a lot more alcohol and drug in the cities, more traffic, people are stressed. Yeah.
Yeah, and people are looking for variety out in the country, and some strange British guy comes biking down the street.
Yeah, especially some of it's like, what on earth are you doing here?
Right.
The other bit is being English, the ability to or push yourself to learn a foreign language is unfortunately a little lacking. When you meet other Europeans or whomever that speak 2 or 3 languages, it does make you feel a bit humble.
Yeah, how's the Spanish going? Is it coming along well, Gary?
Yeah, that was timely. I'm comfortable enough that I can sort of get by. People understand that you only speak un poco español.
Sí.
But it was evident when I ordered the breakfast the other day, and all I heard was fritter, and up until then, I'd had chicken fritters. So I thought this, yeah, for breakfast, and I ended up with a quarter of a fried guinea pig, and I was like, yeah,
Right, but they eat a lot of
they
guinea pig
love
down
guinea
there. Yeah, they
pig.
love it. Did you try
Love
it?
it.
How was
Yeah.
it?
Well, I had to. It was basically what I ordered that breakfast. Yeah, there's not a lot of meat on it,
Right,
surprisingly.
right, right.
I think probably much the same as trying to eat a parrot. But
I mean, it's ironic they
yeah,
call it it's ironic they call it a pig because there's really not a lot of meat on there.
there's not a lot. I couldn't find much at all. I ended up eating the skin, I think it was. But yeah, they sell. Yeah, they obviously eat guinea pig, but they sell rabbits. So
Huh.
yeah, I find it quite
S-
unusual.
Was it good?
No, fortunately, it came with swede. So yeah,
All right.
most of it ended up on the side dish.
Right, so no guinea pig. I mean, for breakfast, that seems a little bit much. I mean, for
Yeah,
any meal
I
really,
didn't.
but breakfast, it's a lot. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I didn't think I could go too wrong with a breakfast, but then all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, you need to start thinking about it. But yeah, there's been other soups and things that you get kidneys or some liver in there. You're basically gonna have to consume some offal somewhere along the line.
Yeah, and a lot of time it's not bad. Like honestly, like they've been cooking it like that for so long that they're able to make it into some. Like when I lived in Korea, I had a lot of stuff I didn't even know what I was eating, and but it was good. Sometimes I just didn't even want to know what I was eating because like it's better not to know that you're eating, whatever brains or whatever. But
That
it's
is
good,
exactly the process, isn't it? That's it. That's
right?
it. It is. It's and you see others that are eating it. You think basically sometimes it's like, well, don't even chew it. You basically it's going to be what your main meal is today. You're gonna you get it down.
Right, right, right. When in Rome, as it were. Have there been any profound issues that you've had, like aside from the flat tires and so forth, and on and on? But there have been any like issues of getting caught camping somewhere, whatever it is, on this trip or any other trip, really?
No, no. I think I'd anticipated a few more border issues.
Right.
Which is in the back of your mind, but that's probably because you've read too much news or you've listened to too many
Sure.
people's opinions that haven't actually been through there.
Mm-hmm.
The only time that I've ever really had an issue with camping was when I was walking around the south coast of England. There was one guy walking a dog that moved me on.
Oh.
Other than that, anywhere else in the world has been fine.
It's interesting though, once you get like I was struck by how much I liked Mexico City, particularly, and Mexico in general. And it was surprising as an American going there because like the media, and I'm sure in the UK too, the media just tells you this is a terrifying place, full of drug cartels and all these kind of things. And certainly
Yeah.
there are those things there. But I found it to be one of the friendliest countries that I've been to in my life. And the people were I never felt any real meanness by anybody. And when I tell people this, when I got back and I tell people this, they're still skeptical because the media,
Yeah.
all they tell you is how terrible, border problems, blah, 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 blah. It's like they want to divide us, Gary. It's like they want us to hate each other. It's weird, or fear each other or something,
Oh, totally, totally. There's definitely an agenda with the news.
Yeah, yeah.
But like you say, I was coming in and definitely borders or for some reason train stations, they can be a bit sketchy. But
Yes, for sure.
I did get warned a couple of times as I was leaving America to be careful, certainly in around some parts of Mexico.
Sure, they got
Um,
yeah.
And it does raise the concern. And then you're just absolutely mystified where it comes from when you actually get there. You think these people are going out their way to look after me.
Right. It
So-
reminds me of like the drug war when I was a kid. They would just say no to drugs. Ronald Reagan would say no to drugs, like all the drugs. So as soon as you grew up under that and you smoke a little weed, you're like, oh, I'm fine. Then you're like, oh, maybe this is all bullshit. Yeah.
yeah,
It's a great metaphor.
before you know
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Then you're on,
Yeah.
then you're shooting up heroin before you know it. And then, yeah.
that's it.
Um,
That's it.
which is all we
Yeah.
did in Mexico City, me and you. Boy, those were the times, weren't they, Gary? All that amazing Mexican heroin.
Yeah,
God,
well, the thing is
God
that
almighty.
I'm not sure we actually were on a balloon. It just felt like it. But yeah, it was best fair. Mexico was a fantastic place for lovely people. I would go back there and ride a different route, see more of it. It was fantastic.
Yeah, I want to see more. I'm actually going back to Mexico City at the beginning of December for a week.
Oh, nice
I'm
one.
excited about
Yep.
that one. Yeah, yeah. So you said the initial reason for the trip was not really to bike around the world. It was just to travel around the world was the initial idea, and you just kind of fell into biking as a result of experimentation.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. It was I'd done a lot of I traveled with my work, and I also done a lot of traveling anyway. I'd done the backpacking thing. I'd done various other, ways of getting around. Uh, and I was not I was a bit older than I wanted to be if I was going to be in a bus doing the backpacking.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
you know, I thought, oh, it's the motorbike option. And then I really did think it's a broken leg at best for
Right.
me on a motorbike.
Right.
So I looked at my next off period when I was 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, I think it was. Or might have been 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off.
Right.
And I looked at doing something with Burma, Myanmar, that had pretty much just sort of opened up since before it was quite restricted and
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
under military control, I think.
Yeah.
And I'd sort of mentally avoided it rather than, dipping my toe in it. But it opened up, and I looked at a mountain bike tour for 2 weeks, and it was just so expensive. I just thought, this is crazy. They had the route, the itinerary on the website, and I just looked at how to get a bike to Bangkok, and then it was like, why not just buy a fold-up one in Bangkok, fly it into Yangon, and ride the Mandalay, and yeah, it was waving. Obviously it looks like a clown bike. You've got
Sure.
18-inch wheels.
Yeah.
Kids loved it.
I'd actually like to see you riding that. Actually, I think it'd be funny. But
Yeah,
it's a shame.
but so did the kids.
Yeah.
So did the kids. I spent the first 12 hours riding it one-handed, just waving at these kids running alongside.
You should have gotten a horn, like one of those. Yeah.
I should have had the red nose.
Right,
and the
red nose and
shoes,
everything. Right.
throwing out candies.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Next time.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, square wheels maybe.
Yeah.
Then,
Yeah. I'll videotape that. I'll come out with a video camera for that one, Gary. I promise. Yeah.
We'll do a couple of weeks for that.
Yep.
So yeah, and then was convinced, and then basically did a little bit of research on getting bike, some of the gear, and yeah, basically my contract came to an end. I chose not to extend it, and then basically flew into Ushuaia and rode up to Peru in the opposite direction from what I'm doing now.
And you were like, yeah, this works. I like this.
Yeah, it was definitely doable. And then, like I say, within that first 6 months, I'm like, yeah, I don't need to. And basically, I stopped looking for new contracts. It just basically, I was still getting offers coming in, and it just sort of like, I just dwindled away from it. And then all of a sudden, it was like, actually, do I really need to go back?
And you were working on the oil rigs, right?
I loved it. I liked the fly in, fly out. I liked the remoteness. There was an element of, everyone on there. There's no dead wood.
Right.
Basically, every bed is taken by a person that is productive.
Right.
You obviously got the politics involved here and there, but I was contracting and brought in to fix problems. So as long as I was diplomatic, things worked for me.
And how did that work? You said what, 4 months on, 4 months off, or something like that, or how did it work? How long?
No, 4 weeks. Sorry,
4 weeks.
Jeff,
4
weeks on.
Right.
They extend it basically so that there's less cost with the flights and there's less logistics. If you're domestic, i.e., if you were working in the American Gulf of Mexico or the British North Sea, you're 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off.
Right.
In Norway, they push it the other way. You've got 2 weeks on, 3 weeks off, but Norway's a bit of an exceptional country. Yeah, and I loved it. It was I like production. It felt as if you were getting stuff done. You could see the results. Yeah, and I was on a good run.
So they would have to helicopter you out, probably, I would imagine.
Yeah, I was flying in from Southeast Asia, connecting in Dubai, and then going over to my last role was in Brazil, which was excellent because the Brazilians were really friendly, really good setup.
So it's mostly Brazilians on the oil rig.
depending on which sector, in the north, in Nigeria, it was Nigerians mostly.
Sure.
With you get a sprinkling of expats. For the Brazilian one, it was a Chevron platform.
Huh.
So you also had Americans in the more senior roles, basically to ensure that Chevron procedures and safety standards
Right,
are
right.
maintained.
Right.
Yeah, and then you would get to the closest point, which for me was Victoria, and then you would do the last hour and a half in the helicopter.
Wow.
Yeah, and when you say about the helicopter there, Jeff, sorry about that.
No.
When you say about the helicopter,
Yeah.
there was where was he from? He was American, but I can't remember exactly where he was from. And I did. He was retiring. He'd served his whole time, I think, with Chevron, so it was quite the retirement package. But and I spoke to him and wished him all the best. And just all I said, "Oh, you're going to be going traveling. Is there anything, Japan or whatever? Do you want to see or that?" He said, "Gary, basically," he said, "I've run my statistics and my percentages." He said, "For all the hours I have flown, I should have crashed something. I should have ditched a helicopter. I
Right.
should have done something." So he was going back to his farm, and that was his retirement.
Don't push Sherlock. Yeah.
Yeah, I had maintenance guys in Nigeria that had been kidnapped. Other people that have been in helicopters that have basically ditched,
Wow.
as they call it.
Wow.
Yeah. And one of the things when you do the offshore survival course is it basically highlights how real it's going to get. It's not going to go down on a nice sunny day. It's going to go down in the dark on a really bad weather. The sea's going to be ferocious. You'll be lucky to get out of the helicopter because there'd be so much panic, or a couple of non-swimmers in there or something. Then you've got to get to a life raft that's obviously going to try to blow away from the helicopter. You've got to cut yourself free from the helicopter and not get dragged down. And then you've only got X amount of time and exposure. For the North Sea, if you don't zip up your exposure suit, which is almost like a dry suit,
Yeah.
you got about 3 minutes. And if it's zipped up, I think you got 3 hours.
Yeah. No, thanks. I'm good. I saw Titanic and I'm all right with it. I don't need to do that. And how many people were on these rigs at the same time? How big were the crew for these things?
Depends on the degree of production or processing that needs to be done with the oil that's coming up out of the ground.
Right.
Some places like North Sea, it comes up pretty good. So but there's some massive ones in the Norwegian sector there.
Like how many
people?
Yeah.
On the platforms?
Yeah.
Typically, 50.
Right.
You're not going to get. The thing is, when you're designing it, you're not going to. These numbers will be all calculated because of the weight and just the physical putting it together.
Right.
Before you take it out wherever it is. So yeah, they got turbines on there. There's they could power a small town or
Right.
But yeah, it was good. Yeah, really interesting. Really, you've got you got diversity from the electrical, the instrumentation, the process guys, the maintenance guys,
Yeah.
safety, cooks, everything.
Do these things move at all, or are they pretty static? Do they sway in the water?
Depends how far offshore you are.
Oh, all right. So if you're in like rougher waters, you're gonna.
Well, the
feel
technology, mainly by the Americans in Texas, started onshore, where they developed all the drilling
Right.
and let's say knowledge of it all. And then as they realized that there was some just in the shore, they moved slightly offshore. And then as technology sort of developed, they've moved further and further away from the shore. So they are basically either anchored as semi-submersible or chained down. There's others now that they use converted oil tankers, really. So the whole production facilities gets put on the oil tanker. They call them floating production units, which they obviously bob up and down in the sea, and then they got some storage, and then another oil tanker will come along, however often, depending on how high the production rates are. and offload, and then the cycle will just continue.
And you're like, when you're on one of these things, you're in the middle of nowhere in the ocean, generally speaking. So you just look around and it's just water as far as the eye can see.
Beautiful, absolutely stunning.
The stars must have been incredible.
It's just gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's just gorgeous. There's some days where you get, like for the North Sea, there was some days where the water will just be absolutely mirrored, flat,
Oh,
calm.
wow.
But
Wow.
yeah, blissful. You see the sun come up. You might see some other flares where they flare off some of the excess gas in the distance. And then another day, that sea will just be violent, and it's just like, I'm not on something big enough to be out here.
Right.
Um,
Right.
you know, it is quite daunting sometimes. But yeah, the Brazil, it was, this, you're up at sort of 5 o'clock or something in the morning, and you see the sun break through, and it's just like, you wouldn't want to be anywhere else. But then you are there to work. There's not a lot of social life with it.
Right. So, were there ever any like instance on one of these rigs that was like dangerous or sketchy in any way? Were you ever in any danger?
I will say the Norwegian one was not the Norwegian one. The Nigerian one was a little bit sketchy. We were on a platform that was designed for something else. It wasn't particularly sized accordingly, and it was meant to degas, which we don't do in most Western areas, prior to it going to a secondary or main facility.
Okay.
And it had what can be best described as sort of like rubber pipe work connecting between the two platforms.
Right.
And one of the flexible hoses basically blew out 3 days before I was due to go, and it just basically shook the whole platform from side to side. You've got gas released at sort of 70 bar, a lot of it. You've still got the flare going. People were running. They were all on the heli deck. And fortunately, one of the local supervisors, he wasn't the supervisor, I think he was the lead operator, decided on his own to go back to the control room. Maybe you should have hit it beforehand, or the supervisor, anyway, whoever should have, and then shut the downsea safety valves off. But yeah, that was that could have been a major incident.
Well, at least you weren't there at the time, so that's dodged a bullet on
Yeah.
that one. Yeah. So, and it pays quite well, as I think you said, the oil rig work, as I imagine it
Yeah.
would pay quite well, because it's somewhat dangerous and remote and all that kind of thing. Hard to have a relationship when you're on an oil rig.
The relationship's a classic one. It's unnatural, really, because you're used to 9 to 5s, only spending weekends and a few hours in the evening. These ones, you've got no contact and then full contact for the 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever it is. So yeah, it's quite an odd one, because the other partner obviously forms a lifestyle whilst you're away working, and whichever way
Right,
around it.
right.
And with the money is good. It's factored in. But one of the main things is, for half of the year, you're in the middle of the ocean. You can't spend it.
Right. So you're saving money. Right.
Exactly. That's the thing that sort of gets missed out of the equation. It's not like you come back with a whole briefcase full of cash.
Right. It's just that you're not spending it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Huh.
The other unfortunate thing is if when younger people get the money gets blown, there's fast cars and lots of lifestyle and whatever else.
Right.
So they can, rather than saving it, invest in it or whatever it is. You see quite older gentlemen still out there with a couple of divorces and whatever else, and really they should have done their time and no longer be exposed to it.
Right, but you got out because you didn't make these mistakes, or you
Wow.
were able to get
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So how long did you work? How many years did you work on these things?
I worked up till I was 45
And you started when you were.
when I left university, so that would have been 23, I think.
Wow.
I didn't go straight into the offshore, to be honest. I had no network or family connections. I wasn't from the local oil or gas areas.
Right.
My first job was in what was it? It was a coatings industry, which photoresist, and then I took a shift manager's role in an edible oils refinery in the Isle of Dogs in London.
Huh. And so then you worked in the oil rigs for 20, 25 years or so. 20 years sounds like, about, give or take.
Yeah, give or take. Give
Yeah.
or take.
And then
yeah.
was that the place that you kind of traveling around the world doing this? Was this where you got kind of the wanderlust that you're now, you're now exploring it now?
I might have had it a little bit before, because I did. I came out of the job from the Isle of Dogs, Jeff, and then did go traveling.
All right. So it's always been a thing. All right.
Yeah, I did. I did the whole year out. Well, a little bit later, I obviously had to pay off my student loans and get some money together, which
Right.
was what I did in those first couple of jobs.
Sure. Sure.
And then yeah, went. Where do we start? Mainly started in India, I suppose, and then Southeast Asia, and then down through to Australia, which is a pretty common route for Europeans.
Yeah.
And then yeah, came back and was fortunate enough, because I got the job through the Institute of Chemical Engineers. I got back in touch with them when I got back to the UK, and they were like, "Well, you did well with the Isle of Dogs shift manager's role. How about, are you still interested in going offshore?" I was like, "Yes," and that was my in. So I was a bit fortunate.
Yeah. So where do you think that this desire to see the world comes from? Like, is it just a thing that is like your family or anybody in your life that influenced you to do this? Like for myself, it was kind of my sister started traveling after she was in, or while she was in college, and kind of got me wanting to do it. But I don't know. I mean, how did it happen for you? Was it just something that you were like, I want to see the world?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I traveled with a mate from university, Tim,
Right.
and he got in touch with me whilst I was basically still, working in London. I, hadn't really rethought of it, and he said that he was getting a little bit over the job he was in, and he said, "Do you still think about going around the world?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, absolutely." He said, "I'm ready to jack in,"
Right.
imminently. I said, "Well, you're going to have to give us a couple of months to get a little bit organized and to say my goodbyes." But yeah, no, obviously, so at university, he was aware, and I was aware that I wanted to travel. We didn't do a lot of holidays as a family. Mainly, let's just say we didn't have the spare cash for it.
Right.
But my granddad did travel, but we didn't know. Well, he basically was going to leave and go to Australia, and then New Zealand, and then he came back. He left, I think, when he was 16, so it's quite bold for a back at the turn of
For sure.
the century.
Yeah.
He was working in coal mines in New Zealand.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and was on better money there than he was when he came back to the UK.
Huh.
And he only came back because he had to settle his estate with them, well, basically, I think his dad was dying.
Right.
And then he met my grandmother when he came back. So that's where that changed. But maybe it did trigger something. But I just, there's a lot to see out there.
Yeah, there is. And it's interesting that some people, I mean, in my perspective is the United States, but it seems like some people do very much want to travel. Not a ton of people, in my experience. And some people just don't have any interest in seeing the world. And I just don't really understand why you wouldn't want to see other places in the world. But then again, some people, I think a lot of it comes out of maybe fear, I mean, or, getting out of your comfort zone, all these kind of things. But yeah.
I do agree with you there, Jeff. The bit where I don't understand why you wouldn't want to see it.
Right. Right.
And a lot of people don't. There's also the bit, because I have to think why. I think people get used to their home life.
Yeah, they nest.
And they nest. They do, and they get comfortable with what they know, and are comfortable with 2-week holiday wherever it is.
Yeah.
They save it and do that, and then and then they're back into whatever else. I suppose they get a structured. I think it's different as well with children. If you've got children,
for sure, yeah.
I think especially if that happens early on, then you sort of realize your focus shifts, and then I think that's possibly where the travel around the world bit gets put on the shelf.
I also think that it's also, fear of the unknown as well. And also a fear of perhaps being like confronted with a reality that you've already decided that whatever, Mexico's a dangerous place. So if you went there and found out otherwise, your reality would be, somehow shattered in a way. I don't know.
Well, I think what happens there, they choose safer destinations.
Yeah, they go to the beach
They-
resorts and yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
We're in Mexico, but really you're just in like an American resort in Mexico or whatever the hell.
There's stuff like Cancun. I hear that is basically the you get more trouble there, even though it's the popular tourist thing, than you
Right.
do other areas.
Right.
So
Right.
what they perceive as the safer option is the more dangerous option.
Well, I think the cartels probably spend a lot of time there because they can sell the drugs to the tourists and all that kind of thing, but who knows? I don't know. Anyway, is there a place you've been in the world, Gary, that is like a highlight where you're like, oh, that was, or one of the, maybe not number one. I know it's hard to do number one, but what's like one of the favorite places that you've been to in the whole world?
You know, Jeff, that's one of the most frequently asked questions, really, when
Oh,
you're
well.
cycling around. And
I'm sure. Yeah.
and I generally say the last country that I've been in, I name that because the memories are freshest. You can list off stuff and various other things. But to answer your question, Japan was amazing.
Yeah.
For me, mostly because it was totally so varied. My perception, I think, was just it was going to be massive Tokyo. And then I got there, and it's 99% Japanese, so you get the
Yeah.
full Japanese
Very,
experience.
very homogenous. Yeah. Yeah.
Lovely, polite, safe, interesting. I like the cultural difference to what we're used to. The other one there is Nepal. You've got the Himalayas, which are unlike anything else.
Sure.
Stunning. You've got the Buddhist. It's a bit like India, but it's without the hassle.
Right.
So Nepal it's up there. Southeast Asia's cool again.
Yeah.
Mainly culturally lovely people, safe. The Buddhist influence is always good. There are, I think there's really special places. I don't think there's many that you go to and come away disappointed. India is just so extreme. I don't think you can come away with India without having some perception, love it or hate it.
Yeah, I don't know that I could do India. I've heard so many stories about just all of the touts and so forth. I don't know that I could, but who knows?
Personal space in India, Jeff. Basically, it's there's 1.4 billion
Yeah.
Indians, and it's not the biggest of countries, and personal space is not something they highly regard.
Oh,
which
yeah.
obviously,
I experienced that in South Korea. The personal space is not even a thing. It was crazy.
not even a thing.
Yeah. And men holding hands, which was weird. There was men are
That's
men-
an
men
Indian
hold-
thing as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. And one of my teachers at one point, we were just walking down the street after having like an introductory meeting, and he tries to hold my hand, and I'm like, yeah, no, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Yeah. We don't do this.
Yeah, we don't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm all for trying to, integrate myself into the culture, but I'm not gonna
But I draw
hold
the line.
hold a middle-aged
Hold
man's
it.
hand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anywhere that you are still wanting to go? What's next on the list?
I was going to get down to Ushuaia, and if I had the timing right on the seasons,
Get down to where?
I was the southern tip of Argentina.
Okay.
It's just south of the Patagonian region.
Right.
It may even be in Ushuaia. It's spelled.
Okay.
I'm not going to try and spell it.
It's okay.
And I was going to come back up, but I will be going back to the UK and sorting out a few things that have popped up. And I suppose I've saved Europe because it's close, and I hopefully can do that at any point
Yeah,
unless
that
they
seems
change.
easy. Yeah. That seems like an easy
Yeah.
one at this point. Yeah.
So I was going to probably try to get back up to sort of like Mexico.
Yeah.
So I was going to try to see a lot more of this area, but circumstances have sort of limited that idea for now. So I would come back, definitely.
Yeah, I would love to explore more of Mexico.
The other one was I was going to ride from Cairo to Cape, which is also a pretty well known cycle route.
Right.
The east of Australia, of Africa, had always been perceived as the safer option
Sure.
than the west.
Yeah.
Whereas now it could be the opposite. You can't continuously ride through the countries on the east, so that it's less appealing. If you can ride the route straight and not have to worry about putting it in a plane, then fair enough. I would probably consider more China, really. I had a quick look in the southern bit, the Yunnan and the Sichuan region, which I enjoyed. So I would consider China.
Yeah. Iceland, you ever want to do Iceland? There's a ring road there. People do that all the time.
They do.
Yeah, it's a beautiful country.
And the only thing is it would be good. You would specifically fly in.
Also windy
your
too.
route.
Yeah, very windy though.
Also
too.
windy.
Yeah.
You'd have to make sure you didn't get too cold.
Yeah.
And air, I would imagine, rather expensive. But
yeah, it's expensive.
It would be good to ride, but probably again a little later on when you haven't got, or I wouldn't be able to designate large chunks of time.
Right.
If it's a bit like cycling around Ireland, that would be great.
Yeah.
But again, I can do that in the summer.
Yeah.
From the UK.
Yeah, I'll do that with you, Gary. I would love to do that. When I was in Ireland, like you can
Absolutely.
see bike paths everywhere, and they're like beautiful, well-paved bike paths all around the country. And it's just, yeah.
Well, we'll line that up, Jeff. We'll get that sorted out.
Yeah. We'll have to do that once I get a job, Gary. Or once the podcast takes off.
There's a few things we got to sort out before.
Yeah, I need to get some money first. Once
we get that sorted,
like the food thing and the money thing figured out, then we'll talk about doing in Ireland.
Yeah, an overseas bike trip. Yeah.
Well, the other side of that one would be that the weather there is kind of shit. So it would be a lot of it does rain quite a bit. So it'd be a wet one.
It would be a wet one. You basically have to be prepared to get very wet. So it would be wet gear. Your camping would be okay, but you'd have to get used to basically putting on wet clothes. And
maybe not. All right, I take it back. I don't want to go. I don't want to go
in a
anymore.
wet tent.
We'll go somewhere else, Gary. I don't want to go. I don't want to go there. We'll just go back to Mexico and we'll go somewhere else.
Mexico. Yeah. Do the Baja.
Sure. Yeah. Down. We can get more of that spectacular heroin we got in Mexico City and just get a rip
and just fly.
Right.
Yep.
Right. It's easier to bike when you're on that heroin. That's what you always said.
That's what I find. Yeah.
That's the thing we haven't talked about is how you were doing this entire trip, just doing heroin the whole way. Isn't that right? We didn't mention that.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
No,
right.
No.
Which is interesting.
Not something I don't bring up very often.
Yeah, no, I know you don't like to talk about it, but we like people to be honest on this podcast. So yeah. Gary, functional heroin addict to a degree that's really impressive.
Wow, what was the isn't it the Rolling Stones lead guitarist or bass Keith
Richards, who should be dead 80 times by this point. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, you're like the biking. You're like the biking version of Keith Richards, Gary.
And I love his dress sense.
Yeah, always got a cigarette hanging out of your mouth, a needle out of your arm, biking down the road. Fucking crazy. Gary doesn't do heroin while he bikes. Just disclaimer for anybody who doesn't understand.
That's right. We better just clear
friendly
it up.
joshing. Yeah. We did ride in an air balloon together though, so that was actually a thing.
We definitely did that, didn't we? We weren't lying on the floor.
We did. That was
some sort of like squat.
Yeah, I never thought I'd go on an air balloon. It was pretty incredible.
That was, and I got to say, I think for a flight, it was absolutely stunning going over those pyramids.
It was one of the you do a lot of touristy things when you go to places, and then some of them disappoint and some of them are good, but that one oversold, except for the ride back was the nightmare part for me.
Oh, but, yes. Yeah. When he basically dropped other people off and went out of his way as opposed
to drop us off last. I don't know what we did, but we did something. I think it was all the heroin you were doing in the back of the.
That's right, and chatting to him all the time.
Right. Well, Gary, the last question, which doesn't seem appropriate based on our conversation about the biking, but the last question I do ask people at the end of the podcast is, what do you think happens when we die?
Interesting. Change of pace there.
Mm-hmm. Well, usually the conversation's more about, I mean, this has been a focus of your biking and all that kind of thing. So it is it does feel like a 180 in this case. Yes, you're right.
Okay. Sometimes it's a little bit more philosophical.
Yeah, that's the word. You got it.
Yeah.
You got there.
It's funny that is quite an interesting, poignant question. Up until for quite a while, I was to the opinion that you did just basically run your course,
Mhm.
and there was nothing afterwards. However, I'm starting to find there possibly is a little bit more to your soul
Mm.
and levels of energy, and whether or not there is a particular chance of reincarnation. So I'm undecided at the moment. I'm certainly not going to say that I'm. That does lead into a creator or non-creator type
Right.
question, which does sort of suggest before the Big Bang there was nothing. How do you have nothing and then everything? So yeah, it could well be
Yeah.
that there is.
Who knows? Consciousness might live
Well,
on.
that's yes, consciousness.
Yeah.
is probably a better description than soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so much easier to believe that this is it when you're like 20 years old, isn't it? And then as you get older, it
Yeah.
becomes a little harder. So you have to start to, yeah.
Well, again, when we've answered, when you get there, you think, oh, people only think like that because they're getting closer to the end and they want something else, and they're not comfortable with the idea that it does just end.
Right.
But it's more than that.
Yeah, I think so too.
Your thinking changes, and it's like actually nothing isn't quite enough of an answer. Could well be, because I mean, there's greater minds that do actually split the difference. That you've got physicists that do and don't believe in it, astrologists, whichever it is. So I'm still not completely convinced. Whereas before I was quite a stringent atheist, thinking that there is nothing else, and I was quite let's say blasé about the fact that whoever thought there was other things, I was quite happy for them to think it.
Sure.
But I was thinking they're way off the mark. Whereas now I'm actually like, I don't believe that, which religion could be closest to the right truth. But the consciousness thing is the bit that I find most open-ended.
Yeah. And I also think, like, I was raised Catholic, so the only spiritual ideas I was exposed to as a child was just like Christianity and pretty much it, right? And I think as I've gotten older and as time has gone on, there's been much more of an exploration of what even the nature of consciousness is, and many more people meditating and many more people doing yoga and things like this the New Age movement, if you want to call it something. And I think that's also contributed a little bit to my rethinking of my beliefs about what perhaps this all is or what it isn't, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went along to what is it, the 10-day silent retreat
you
in
told me.
in Thailand.
Yeah.
And reading around the belief of Buddhism, it's it's solid, it's well put together. I don't think Western people adopt it particularly well. You can't sort of uneducate the Christian upbringing
Yeah.
and try to shoehorn it into the Buddhist thing. I think it suits the Southeast Asian and Indian and Nepalese better.
Yeah, I agree. Although I would say that even a little bit of Buddhism is better than no Buddhism at all.
Absolutely.
It should be their
if you're going to
slogan.
pick,
That should be their slogan.
oh,
I think. They should wrote
that's
their new
right.
slogan.
Yeah.
A little bit of Buddhism. is better
Start
than-
producing T-shirts and mugs.
Right.
But I think if you were going to choose one, I'd choose that one. If we were going to have anything,
For
if
sure.
you could if you could go carte blanche across the whole world, and people had the choice of nothing and or that is the one I think we should have.
Right. I mean, Buddhism isn't really jive with capitalism either, so I feel like that's kind of not going to work out too well. Although Jesus wasn't big on money either, but they've kind of forgotten about that part of the Bible, I guess.
Yeah, I think basically I think they emphasize on materialism
Yeah.
is the root. So
Yeah, they really do.
which is materialism is the one that is a progression of capitalism. It's moving into greed.
Right.
So
right.
if you could moderate a form of capitalism, I think you could probably have them working symbiotically.
I don't know, but I know that I don't know, and that's all that I need to know.
Yeah, that works well, Jeff.
Anyway, Gary, it was wonderful to hear your voice again. I haven't talked to you for I don't know, it's only been 8 months, but we had such a good time in Mexico City. You're one of these people that I've met on my travels that I'm like, I'm going to know Gary forever. So I'm really
Absolutely,
glad. I'm really
Jeff.
glad we got a chance to catch up. Oh, my brain. And yeah, thanks for sitting down and talking about this. You're good luck on your biking. How long are you going to be? When do you head out? Tomorrow, you said?
I will be tomorrow. Yeah, I'll probably make. It's always a little bit later than you think. Not, when you're wrapping a tent up, you can be gone by 7 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
When you're leaving a comfortable piece of accommodation,
yeah.
it is closer to 9:30.
And how far are you going to bike tomorrow? Do you think? How many miles you do? How many kilometers or miles do you do a day?
I used to say if you're roughly, you can aim for 100K a day consistently without actually sort of blowing your legs.
Right.
It's a little bit different in the mountains and all the headwinds, so you've got to factor that in. And road surface. If it's sealed, you're good as gold. If it's gravelly, things can get a little bit harder.
Yeah.
But what I normally do for the first one is I just sort of get myself away from where I'm leaving,
Right.
and look for somewhere suitable early in the afternoon, just so that you got your first day and a decent camping place
Right.
set up for, and then you get into your rhythm after that.
What's the highest elevation you've been at, do you think, at this point on the trip?
Oh,
like high enough where it was like hard to breathe?
yeah. I mean, I'm not sure how high they get in North America, but
I mean,
we must have
Colombia,
had,
it must have been high. Yeah, that's a ridiculous question, because some places up there are like 8,000, 9,000 feet, which is, I don't know how many of your kilometers that is, but
yeah, good 4,000 meters.
Yeah,
easy, and plus, I think it pushes 5 and a bit at some of the passes, possibly across the Andes.
God damn.
Obviously, the Himalayas previously, you're up high. But for the beauty of all of that, you get the views. So
yeah. And you're gonna be ripped, Gary, when you're done with this trip. You're gonna be legitimately ripped.
Well, the legs, you end up with,
right. The legs will be ripped. The upper body, yeah. Like the
disproportionate. You end up going home looking like a frog. But tiny little arms.
You end up going home like those like Tour de France riders. They all look like they have giant legs and little bitty upper bodies. Yeah, it's kind of funny. Yeah. Well, you can glutton. You can be a glutton when you get back to England and eat all that delicious British food that your country is known for.
That's so well known for.
Boiled potatoes and boiled pizza and all that kind of thing. Yum.
It's amazing. It's amazing that everyone seems to have a beer gut though.
Well, it gets good Indian food.
Yes, they do have good Indian food.
It's funny.
Yeah.
All right, Gary. Well, wonderful talking to you. Thanks for doing this. Good luck on the ride. Keep me posted. And yeah, let's keep in touch, man. I'll talk to you again soon, I hope.
Nice one, Jeff. Absolutely. Keep in touch.
Yeah, man. Love you, my friend.
Love you too.
And that was Gary Clark, about to continue his trip south through the Peruvian mountains and towards Tierra del Fuego. It was great to catch up with Gary, and I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. And if you did enjoy this conversation, please share the podcast with someone. Trying to grow a podcast takes a village. And if you yourself enjoy the show, then your friends probably will too. Just text them a link to 1FJeffPod.com, which is the brand new website for the podcast. It's a bit bare bones at the moment, but it gets the job done. 1FJeffPod.com. And if you'd like to follow Gary on his epic bike journey, you can follow him on Instagram at Gary_Clark. That's Gary_Clark. Clarke, CLARKE. And if you'd like to follow this podcast on its epic podcast journey, you can follow it on Instagram at 1FJeffPod. That's 1FJeffPod, one word. I'm always interested in your thoughts, feedback, or suggestions, which you can email to me, as always, at 1FJeffPod@gmail.com. And for those of you not listening with a notepad at hand, all this information will also be available in the show notes. I'm going to leave you today with a short poem by the legendary Rumi, which feels strangely appropriate in these strange, heartbreaking times. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. Take care of yourselves, my friends. I'll see you soon.
Very good, Jeffrey.